This is Dueling Pistols, where history draws first and legends never die. No fluff, no filters, just raw stories of grit, blood, and legacy. Triggered by Black Flag. All right, folks, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Brian Call. I'm joined by my brother, Brent Call. How are you, Brent?
I'm well, thank you.
Okay, we're getting right back into the book. We're in the story of Kit Carson, epic story of Kit Carson, the conquest of the American West. You notice it says conquest. It wasn't like
expansion.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was like
the westward move.
They conquered it.
Yeah,
I mean that's what it was. And right now you have the legacy of the old world coming over, Boone's time frame. You know, you had the English and the Spanish and the French, plus all the Indian tribes, all vying for ownership of this land, you know. And basically the English had really put their foothold on the east, and the French more north in Canada, and the Spanish kind of more south and toward Mexico and all that. And what has happened is slowly over time, the people who lived here then won their independence from the English, which is Americans, and now they have been sort of moving to the west, while the Spanish have now been booted by the Mexicans, who did a lot to the Spanish what we did to the English, the British Empire, and they pushed out the Spanish. So now you have the Mexicans. The Mexicans have quite a bit of land in the form of California and other areas. And then I think the English are still, you know, they've still got a foothold in Oregon, Washington kind of stuff right now. And so President Polk is kind of like, I got 4 years in office and I'll probably die because he's not the healthiest dude. And he's like, and I want the West to be, I want the border of the United States to be ocean to ocean. I want it all. Mm-hmm. And now they are like doing everything they can to get it.
That's a huge advantage to have an ocean at your border rather than another country.
Right. And it's kind of like, well, you can either, you know, it's right there for the taking, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there's still world powers across the ocean.
Sure.
You know, keep in mind, you have Napoleon and the French, and you have English, and you have all the stuff happening on the other side of the ocean that could at some point, well, this is after, but still, you have these armies that are still a potential threat. The more that America can solidify itself, it's just a fledgling baby nation. Mm-hmm. The more power and resources they can acquire, the more people that they can put under one flag and under one nation, you know, in theory, the stronger they can be. So anyway,
or at least appear.
So right now we have this Stephen Watts Kearny, General Stephen Watts Kearny, still marching his army of the West across the nation, okay, going toward the West. And it says by mid-August, General Stephen Watts Kearny's forces were only a few days' march away from Santa Fe, passing through the tiny towns of Tecolote and San Miguel, and then, I just butchered that, I'm sure. Then following the bends of the Pecos River. So he had heard a lot of rumors about Armijo, and he just decided he was going to ignore them all. Apache Canyon might be the Sila, he was pressing on, averaging 20 miles a day, a frenetic pace for an army that had already logged 800 miles. Two-thirds. So he was going how far? 20 miles a day with an army.
Wow. With an army. That's crazy.
And dragging their asses across.
Do they just have
nation.
like 3 horses per dude?
Most of them don't have horses, yeah.
They're walking.
Oh, yeah. 20 miles a day, and they've already covered 800 miles.
Gosh, how many boots do you think they went through?
Dude, they're in a race, too, because you're starving to death. Mm-hmm. You can't have that many people. Like, just, you know, how do you feed them all? You're doing your best. So, especially back in that time frame, armies, so much of it was logistics, food, keeping them alive. The longer it took to get to a place, the more peril the army was under. So it was move fast. It said 2/3 of the horses had died along the way, a fact that Kearny, the equine sentimentalist, found hard to bear. Most of his cavalry had become infantry, joining the larger body of Missouri volunteers who had slogged it on foot all the way from Fort Leavenworth. Kearny's blistered men were now practically starving. They had been on 1/3 ration since Bent's Fort, and they grumbled about the smiting heat. Our guns become so hot we cannot handle them, one wrote, and the sand burns our feet. The dreaded sirocco blows as from a heated oven. burning us even through our clothes. The discontented men say, let us be anywhere rather than in the desert. The land was so parched, wrote another soldier, that it appeared as though it had not been refreshed by a shower since the day of Noah's flood. To make matters worse, water on the trail was hardly potable. Marcellus Edwards of Missouri's Company D described a pool of rancid water his thirsty comrades dived into one early August morning. It was so bad, quote, that one who drank it would have to shut both eyes and hold his breath until the nauseating dose was swallowed. Notwithstanding its scarcity, some men allowed their horses to tramp through it, which soon stirred it up to a thick mud, and to give it still greater flavor, we found a dead snake with the flesh dropping from the bones.
Flavor.
Kearney dismissed all such whining and pushed on without a break. He understood the salient fact of invasion, that delays almost always favor a defense. He kept receiving strange letters from Armijo, letters meandering on inelegant phrases that said everything and nothing. I'm telling you, it's Kamala Harris. Army of the West Lieutenant John Hughes described one such letter as very politely dictated and so ambiguous in its expression that it was impossible to know whether it was the governor's intention to meet General Kearney in council or in conflict.
It's so weird. That is such like a politician move.
Yeah.
He sent letters, Brian, that they don't know what he said. Letters, like
Dude,
pages.
You can't believe it until you actually see someone like that speak, and you're like, wow.
Mm-hmm. That double
says
speak where they
all
don't
this
say
stuff
anything.
but don't say anything at all.
It's an art form.
It's
I'll give him that.
embarrassing, is what it is. You said you talked for 10 minutes and didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Another advantage of maintaining a high rate of speed, Kearney believed, was that it kept his forces out of trouble. The pace of their march gave the men focus. It harnessed them to the task at hand. It kept their appetites from wandering. With such a large and unruly army of green volunteers spread out over 100 miles of trail, there was every opportunity for a devolution of military order. As the war progressed in other provinces of northern Mexico, General Zachary Taylor's volunteers were acquiring a reputation for sexual terrorism.
Oh, geez.
As one historian put it. But the Army of the West simply had no time or energy for rape and pillage. Riding up and down the ranks, the stern Episcopalian general set a tone of probity. John Hughes saw Kearney as a sagacious officer well fitted for command of veteran troops, but he believed the general unfairly expected the same high standards of rigid austerity from the Missourians as he did from his seasoned dragoons. The volunteers, Hughes thought, are bred to freedom and fired by feeling, principle, and honor rather than the study of arms. These young bucks feared and respected Kearney, but they did not much care for his discipline. The punishments Kearney meted out could be severe, even Sisyphean. That like Sisyphean.
Does that have to do with Sisyphus?
I think so. One Army of the West diarist reported a case in which a group of 5 soldiers, having committed some minor infraction, were court-martialed for insubordination and then each sentenced to lug 40 pounds of sand for a week.
Sisyphean, that's how it's said, denoting or related to a task that can never be completed. Why don't you haul bags of sand for me, guys?
That's just degrading.
Right?
I don't even carry anything important.
Yeah.
That's what they did at Auschwitz.
One rock from one end of the field to the other. Go.
Why? Just because.
Because.
After trekking all this way across the scorched continent, most of the Missourians were itching for a fight. One volunteer wrote that he and his comrades were full of ardor, burning for the battlefield and panting for the reward of honorable victory. As rumors of the coming engagement at Apache Canyon spread, a palpable excitement gathered in their ranks. The pace of their march quickened, and they erupted in war songs. Oh, what a joy to fight the Dons and wallop fat Armijo. So clear the way to Santa Fe with all that we agree-o.
What? Is that some Spanglish he threw out there at the
This
end?
is what the Missourians are rednecks.
Oh, geez.
Oh, what a joy to fight the Dons and wallop fat Armijo. So clear the way to Santa Fe. With that, we all agree-o.
You know, the guy that came up with that thought he was so slick. You know, he was like, bro, check this out.
This is how I pretend I speak Spanish.
Yes, that is the most gringo thing. El Bathrumo.
Where's the El Bathrumo? In contrast to his hot-blooded volunteers, however, General Kearney did not want to engage the enemy unless he absolutely must. In fact, he preferred not to view the New Mexicans as enemies at all. Kearney hoped to take a New Mexico without firing a shot. It would be a bloodless conquest. He understood that if the United States intended to occupy this province and eventually absorb it into the Union, he would have to win the people over. Just treat them better than the Mexicans. That's not that hard. Than the Mexican leaders.
All you gotta do is show up for him. That's all he had to do in Vegas.
Yeah. And so in every settlement he passed, he met with the local leaders and gave some variation of the speech he had delivered from the rooftop in Las Vegas. His men would harm no one, he said. The United States was not hostile to Catholicism. The American army would protect them against the savage tribes. Their women were safe. No one would be branded like a steer. With his interpreters, Kearney wrote up a proclamation in Spanish that conveyed all these points and then sent riders ahead to tack up copies in every town square. In several instances, Kearney's troops captured Mexican spies who had been dispatched by Armijo. But rather than hold them as prisoners, the general decided the better course was to show mercy and release them. By doing so, he hoped that they might return to Santa Fe and spread stories of American beneficence. More cynically, he trusted that they would report back to Armijo and exaggerate the might of the American forces. Kearney knew from experience that an army's size had a way of growing in the excitement of the retelling. Yeah. On the night of August 17, Kearney camped near the ruins of the ancient pueblo of Picos, in a grassy valley where the Picos River came spilling from a cleft in the mountains. Picos had been occupied for 500 years, and until recently, it was the largest of all the Pueblo Indian villages. At one time, as many as 3,000 people had lived there. The Pueblo had a legend that concerned the fire of Montezuma. Look that one up, Brent.
The fires of Montezuma.
The Indians believed that they were related to the great Aztec leader, and that one day long ago, Montezuma instructed them to build a permanent fire in a subterranean chamber. Under no circumstances was the fire to be exhausted until a certain people arrived from the east to liberate them from the tyrannies of Spanish rule. Interesting. Keep that fire going. And so for hundreds of years, as they languished under conquistadors and friars, the Picos people secretly fed the fire in a special kiva, a round ceremonial room with a smoke hole built underground. Over the patient centuries, tending the fire remained a kind of druidic ritual for them, a symbol of their longing for the prophesied deliverers. Interesting. The rites were dutifully maintained until the year 1838, when some rash of diseases doubtlessly borne on the wagon trains that passed the Pueblo in nearby Santa Fe Trail decimated the Picos population. Then a series of Comanche raids nearly finished them off. Facing extinction, the last 17 Picos Indians vacated their once great Pueblo and took up residence in the safety of the Jemez mountain 60 miles to the west. And they joined the kindred tribe that spoke the same language. The fire was left to die at Picos, but it was said that a dedicated group of the exiles transported the last embers to their new home in the Jemez and continued the tradition there. Fire of Montezuma, Aztec Indians. Kearney's soldiers were amazed by the Picos ruins and liked the sound of the legend, particularly the part about a certain people coming from the east to liberate the long-suffering Indians. What do the Picos ruins look like?
How do you spell Picos? P-E-C-O-O?
P-E-C-O-S. It says that the Picos had been a thriving village when the first conqueror, Coronado, passed through the parts in 1540, claiming this kingdom for the Spanish, who were sure that somewhere nearby there existed 7 cities of gold, which could be dismantled, melted into ingots, and shipped home to feed the great empire.
So it's more like a fort almost, with a little bit of a town kind of sprawling out away from it, but it's, there you go. A little bit of a structure, got a little corral for horses and stuff like that.
Wow.
It's pretty big. I mean, like, I ain't building that.
Though exhausted, many of Kearney's soldiers tramped over the listing walls of the Picos ruins, blinking at their grandeur of history and their own place in it. One of the soldiers who kept a journal, Private Frank Edwards from Illinois, was told that the Picos ruins had been built by a master race of white giants who stood 15 feet tall. The idea did not seem completely preposterous to Edwards. The bones, which have been dug from the floor of the church, are certainly of gigantic size, he wrote. A thigh bone that I saw could never have belonged to a man less than 10 feet.
What?
As he was examining the giant's femur, a mule that Edwards had tied up outside broke loose from its picket and clopped into the ruined mission church. Apparently as anxious to satisfy his curiosity as I was, the mule climbed up to the place where the altar had once stood. It gravely turned around, Edwards wrote, and gave vent to his pious feelings in a long yee-haw.
Okay, when he said vent, I thought he was like ripping one or something. Like he just went up to the thing and started ripping it.
Yes. So, Army of the West is moving to the west, moving towards Santa Fe. They already did the whole Las Vegas, you're ours now thing. Armijo is in the pass. We're trying to get his army there to fight him when they come through. And Kearney's kind of ignoring everything because he can see that Armijo's an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're about to get into a disappointing and dark little story, a little blight on Kit Carson's character.
More so than the Klamath accident?
Yes, probably so. I think so. It's chapter 18, Your Duty, Mr. Carson. The windswept grass on the jumbled hills had crisped to a fine summer gold when Kit Carson guided his mule down through the gambrel oak thickets and into a tiny village of Sonoma, California. So they had a ragtag column of 160 volunteers in Fremont's group. They were all sunburnt, tired. The cows, they were getting some liquor. The men were drunk. It wasn't, this isn't the most tight ship being run. It was June 25, 1846, and Carson tried to make sense of this chaotic scene. A week and a half earlier, on June 14, a well-armed posse of American hotheads, citing outrages mostly imagined, had risen up against the Mexican authorities and seized this adobe village not far from the shallows of northern San Francisco Bay. Calling themselves Osos, O-S-O-S, Bears, these self-styled revolutionaries took Sonoma's leading citizens as prisoners, cleaned out the modest-sized armory, stole all the horses they could find, and then declared the birth of an independent nation state, the Bear Flag Republic. The Bear Flag Republic. The Osos carried out the spontaneous revolt with a giddy sense of melodrama, as though it were the Boston Tea Party of the West. They called their movement High and Holy, and one of the revolt leaders said the world had not hitherto manifested so high a degree of civilization. Wow.
So it looks like
these guys are LARPing.
Oso means bear.
I know.
Yeah, so they're the Bears?
Yeah.
Nice.
They sound real brilliant. One of Fremont's own men thought that most of the rebels were moved by nothing but the chance of plunder without the slightest principle of honor.
Lovely.
It said that using Sonoma as a base, the Bears planned to sweep southward and take over Monterey, Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, and the rest of California. But for now, they were content to consolidate their initial victory while savoring their new symbol of solidarity. Dude, this place is so managed that just some rabble can come in and be like, it's ours now. It's insane, this period of time. Over the town plaza, a new flag flapped in the breeze, a slightly deformed banner fashioned from scraps of ladies' undergarments, with a grizzly bear, or something they called a bear, as one early historian of the revolt put it, rising on its haunches. The crude image dribbled in berry juice. Today's state flag draws its design from this improbable standard. You've seen the California state flag. John Fremont's role in this uprising was tangential, but nonetheless crucial. His presence in California was the catalyst that made it possible. Ever since he had led his exploring party out of Oregon, in Oregon wilds back to Sacramento River, he had been gauging the unrest among the American expatriates. He'd visit their camp, kind of talk about, are we going to cause a war? What are we going to do? Still, there was a certain cognitive dissonance to Fremont's moves and positions. The settlers couldn't figure him out. He feared the consequences of his own involvement while also fearing the consequences should accelerating events leave him behind. He wanted to be part of this revolution. He wanted a name for himself, but he also didn't want to get himself killed or mess it all up. So he vacillated for more than a month. He brooded and schemed and sent mixed signals. Now that moment had arrived, Fremont learned that General Jose Castro in Monterey, as a direct response to the Bear Flag Revolt, had issued an ultimatum demanding that all American foreigners leave the country or be driven out by force. Get out of here.
Yeah. Well, let's see you back that up, buddy.
So, this was the provocation that Frémont felt he needed. As a U.S. Army officer, he was not authorized to attack the Californians, but he could certainly defend American citizens from Californian attack. So Frémont quickly gathered up an army consisting of his exploring expedition plus some 100 other volunteers and hastened to Sonoma to rebuff De La Torre's offense. Okay. So Frémont's army was a strange multinational force of buckskin rogues and filibusters. One non-combatant observer described them as Americans, French, English, Swiss, Poles, Russians, Chileans, Germans, Greeks, Austrians, Pawnees.
No, Brian, those are white men. Shut up. Those are a bunch of white guys.
If the Mexicans can whip this crowd, they can beat all the world, for Castro will whip all nations, languages, and tongues. Okay, so Castro is the leader over the Mexican side. By the time Frémont and Carson rode into Sonoma that fine June day, the Osos had already successfully repulsed Captain De La Torre, and the situation seemed calm. But now Frémont was committed to the Bear Flag cause, and impatient, and he wanted to just, okay, let's do this thing, let's conquer. Without his help, the army settlers would face inevitable disaster, he feared. In the teeth of the more numerous forces the Mexican Californians would soon muster. Okay, so he put up an army, the army and the flag of the United States. Quickly, Frémont seemed to undergo a personality transformation. He chucked all pretense of being an explorer and now took signing his dispatch as commander of United States Forces, California. Dude, this guy's a fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Like,
he's been bluffing his way across the country, and I'm
forever just like, let's roll. He wore a felt hat and more flamboyant garb, surrounded himself with Delaware Indians as bodyguards, and tied natty green ribbons around his horse's tail and neck. I am telling you, it's just LARPing, and more LARPing until someone wins.
What are they wrapping on the horses? Just green?
Natty green ribbons. Mm-hmm.
Why?
He recognized the various combatants into a unit, reorganized. Recognized. It says... he just started to be in charge and tell these Oso guys, follow me. And then, when he got called out by a Swiss-born trader, ranch owner who was from the area, Frémont said, hey, if you don't like what I'm doing, then you can go and join the Mexicans. So, basically, it says that, John Joaquin de la Torre and his small army of 100 men had retreated only a few miles from Sonoma. When Frémont learned this, he and his California battalion gave chase, pursuing the captain to the mission of San Rafael near the shores of San Francisco Bay. But the Californian managed to escape by a clever ruse. He wrote a false note disclosing a plan to outflank Frémont and reattack Sonoma. He sent the dispatch by courier he deliberately arranged for the Americans to intercept, thus buying him time so that he could sneak with his army across San Francisco Bay in a schooner vanishing in the fog.
You know?
Oh, Mexican Californian, he was sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
Then Frémont learned of a tragedy that had befallen a pair of Bear Flag insurrectionists. A few days earlier, an American named Fowler and another named Cowie secretly ventured north from Sonoma to secure gunpowder at a small coastal outpost called Bodega.
Cowie is a sick name.
But a band of Mexican guerrillas captured and brutally lynched the two Americans. The two men were tied to trees and slashed with knives, their limbs pulled apart with lariats.
What's a lariat?
It's a rope. It's a roping rope.
Oh,
it's the West, Brent.
I get that, but still, like, everything was going along fine. A little bit of murder. Everything's going along fine. The murder, like, the tragedy just sneaks up out of nowhere.
They were tied to trees and slashed with knives, their limbs pulled apart with lariats.
So they're drawn and quartered, basically.
Sounds like
with a little extra help with the knife. Good Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is one of the worst ways to go.
It was an outrageous crime and the worst bloodshed in what had thus far been a placid and uneventful revolt. But now the Bear Flaggers cried out for retribution, as did Frémont and Carson. On Sunday, June 28, Frémont spotted a small boat crossing the bay and ordered Carson to intercept it. The boat landed near San Quentin, and 3 men stepped ashore. They were 2 20-year-old twins, Ramon and Francisco de Haro, and their elderly uncle, Jose de los Berreyesa. They were prominent citizens. The two young men were the sons of the mayor of Sonoma.
Oh.
What happens next is subject to some debate, and different accounts stress different points. But Carson apparently arrested the three men and demanded that they hand over any dispatches they might be carrying. They appeared nervous and uncooperative, but insisted they harbored no messages. Though it was obvious these three men were not soldiers, Carson was suspicious. He called to Frémont and asked him what he wanted to do with them. "Captain, should I take these men prisoner?" he yelled from a distance. Frémont waved his hand dismissively. "No," he replied. "I have no use for prisoners." Then he added cryptically, "Do your duty." Carson was not sure what his commander meant by that. He lingered for a moment, then had a brief consultation with some of the other men who had accompanied him to the boat landing. They gradually realized that Frémont intended for these three captives to pay for the deaths of Fowler and Cowie. Frémont would not carry out the deed himself and later disavowed having any part in it. But he insisted that his loyal scout follow through. He yelled, "Mr. Carson, your duty." That was good enough for Carson. Without another apparent thought, he turned and gunned down the DeHaro twins and their uncle in cold blood. Some accounts say that several men fired along with Carson. Frémont seemed satisfied by the execution and the retribution it afforded. "It is well," he proclaimed after he heard the rifle reports. According to one eyewitness, Carson then searched the bodies and, as he'd suspected, found dispatches on one of them. Neither Carson nor Frémont mentioned anything about this little atrocity in their memoirs. It remains one of the more unfathomable episodes of Carson's life. One cannot easily attribute his actions to the sort of ignorant racism that animated so many jingoistic soldiers who would fight in the Mexican War. Carson was married to a Hispanic, was a Catholic, spoke Spanish, and had for 2 decades enjoyed wide circles of Mexican friends. People who otherwise loved Carson had trouble accepting his role in this incident. Years later, one of his close friends, W.M. Boggs, would condemn it as a cold-hearted crime. But in this murder, as in the attack on the Klamath village, a certain troubling pattern had shown itself, one that would recur in Carson's later campaigns. It was a kind of dark symbiosis between authority and action. Frémont needed Carson to carry out his dirty work, and Carson needed Frémont, apparently, to tell him what to do. Modern psychiatry might call these two men codependents. Together, they were far more lethal than when apart. Unwilling to disappoint a superior, Carson seemed incapable of resisting an order he personally disagreed with. When given a command, he was the good soldier in such situations. His trigger finger did not communicate with his conscience.
And it said that neither of them wrote about that in their memoirs, right? Like,
Yep. They didn't mention this side incident in their whole story.
That would lead me to believe there's some shame on some part.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, shame, but also fear of consequences. I mean, you can justify a lot of things in the heat of the moment. Mm-hmm. The two other guys were drawn and quartered and ripped apart by horses.
And these guys are delivering missives.
And these guys are related to the leaders in the towns and all that. You know, they're basically, citizens of the town. One could justify it in the sense that they lied, they were carrying. Mm-hmm. And so you just executed, an enemy, but
you didn't have to execute and get those missives.
No. And you didn't, and execution, is that really the crime at this point that they deserved? This isn't all out war.
Did all three of them know that they had missives, or was just the one person who had the missives?
These are two young boys.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no need to kill them at all. So there's a lot of this sort of justified revenge, though. Mm-hmm. You kill ours, we kill yours,
Yeah, but eventually an eye for an eye. You run out of eyes real quick, Bri.
You do.
That's the problem with that. It's not a lot of room for mistakes.
2 weeks later, Frémont's California battalion made its way to the provincial capital of Monterey. Warships of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Squadron had already sailed into the magnificent harbor and, in a bloodless takeover, claimed the town for the United States. Now anchored in the bay were 2 American transport ships, 3 frigates, and 3 sloops, each of which was fixed with 44 guns. The Stars and Stripes flew uncontested over Monterey's scallop of shoreline.
There's something that really gets me excited about cannons. When I was in scout
they're
camp,
just giant bombs that are getting flung.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was at scout camp at Baldwin, they have a cannon they used to shoot off every morning until it accidentally blew up and killed someone a couple years ago. But I'll tell you what, when I was at scout camp, I used to wake up every morning to get there extra early so I could watch them shoot a cannonball into the ocean.
So they roll in. They just took it. The U.S. Navy. So we can imagine that Gillespie knew this was happening. Probably that he, you got Frémont on the other side on the land, and they're kind of getting surrounded. It says that there's this new commander.
I would say who's on the ships?
Robert Field Stockton.
Is he under Frémont or is he above Frémont? That's my question.
The pompous seaman aboard whose ship Senator Tom Benton was almost killed by errant cannon fire. It says a wealthy businessman from New Jersey. It's a bunch of people. He had sailed much of the world. It says when he was at home, he nursed eclectic ventures, canals, real estate, naval architecture, politics. And he would become a U.S. Senator from New Jersey, and his tendency for long-winded speech-making earning him the nickname Gassy Bob.
Do you know how long-winded as a politician you have to be to get that kind of a name?
Ever since he arrived in Monterey and assumed command of the Pacific Squadron, Stockton held an exaggeratedly high opinion of his status in California. My word is at present the law of the land, he wrote President Polk. My person is more than regal.
Wow. All right. Humble.
Yeah, the power what people get. If it is possible, the Commodore nursed even greater ambitions for personal glory than did Frémont. Upon learning from a Mexican newspaper account that the U.S.-Mexican War was officially on, Stockton became impatient to mop up operations in California. Stockton proposed to join forces with Frémont's men and quickly conquer Los Angeles and the rest of California. The Commodore dashed off an obnoxious declaration of war against General Jose Castro, a document as inflamed as it was untruthful. Stockton claimed that he was receiving daily reports from the interior of scenes of rape, blood, and murder. A lie, of course. Cowie and Fowler were the only known deaths, and thanks to Carson, they had been more than avenged. General Castro, Stockton went on, has violated every principle of international law and national hospitality by pursuing with wicked intent Captain Frémont, who came here to refresh his men after a perilous journey across the mountains on a scientific survey. These men are liars.
Bro, the gall these people having to put this to paper is just insane.
They just needed a pretense.
These are the most gaslighty SOBs.
For these repeated hostilities and outrages, Stockton concluded, military possession was ordered to be taken of Monterey and San Francisco until redress could be obtained from the government of Mexico. This is how most wars start, though. They're like, you did these things, which were total lies. They didn't really do anything.
You've got weapons.
They just need a precursor to go in, just an excuse, which is sad. I mean, that's what a lot of people need when they want to do something that they know they shouldn't. Just an excuse. Stockton soon reorganized Frémont's army as the Naval Battalion of Mounted Riflemen. It says he designated Gillespie a captain and Carson a lieutenant. So then they became like a real army. They weren't volunteer army.
Oh, so they got swooped up.
And it sounds like a lot of them were not happy with that because they wanted to be volunteers, and now they just got made conscripted.
They got shanghaied.
So they weren't too happy about that. It says that by late July, the Commodore told Frémont to prepare for his first assignment to sail for San Diego, from which he was then to fan out and conquer Los Angeles and the rest of Southern California. The evidence of war was not far at hand. Anchored alongside the American ships in Monterey Bay was a single British man-of-war, the Collingwood, as it was called, a formidable vessel armed with 80 guns.
Okay, so they've got 3 on the coast right now with 40 guns apiece, or is it just the frigates that had the 40 guns?
I'm not sure.
That's a lot. 80 guns? They had 40 was what they mentioned before, but I can't remember how many of the frigates are.
So the British ship is no joke.
80 guns? That's huge.
For Stockton and Frémont, the presence of the British flagship was proof enough that the English had planned to take over California and that the American Anglophobia had been justified all along. Fremont said he and his men looked upon the Collingwood with the feeling of a racer who had crossed the finish line a hair ahead of his opponent. In truth, though, the British were keenly interested in California. The Collingwood had sailed into Monterey primarily to gather intelligence and to ensure that English mercantile interests were not being encroached upon. The Collingwood's commander, Sir George Seymour, exchanged pleasantries with the officers of the U.S. Pacific Squadron and gave no signs of aggression. So the British sailors felt like Fremont's motley army of mountain men was interesting. The English seemed to marvel at the trappers as though they were some fabled elite, like French legionnaires, perhaps, or samurai warriors. One officer aboard the Collingwood thought Carson and his comrades were a curious set, who had passed years in the wilds living upon their own resources. Dressed in long, loose coats of deerskin, many of them were blacker than the Indians. The Englishman continued, one or two enjoy a high reputation in the prairies. Kit Carson is as well known there as the Duke of Wellington is in Europe. So they swapped stories. They played games.
So they're just playing buddy-buddy with the English right now?
Mm-hmm. On July 25, Fremont's battalion boarded the Sinai, a Navy sloop, and set sail for San Diego. These men were not ready for this. They had not ever been on an ocean or on a ship before or sailed anywhere. These are mountain men, Missourians. Carson certainly was a confirmed landlubber. He had been looking forward to the voyage, but soon found that maritime life did not agree with him. As the Sinai heaved in the Pacific swells with the headlands of Big Sur shimmering off to port, he grew seasick. For him, the 4-day sail to San Diego was pure hell. He told a friend he would never again board an ocean-going vessel. Not as long as mules have backs, Carson said. I swore it would be the last time I would leave sight of land, adding, I'd rather ride on a grizzly than on this boat.
That's crazy. Have you ever met anyone that got that seasick?
I mean, we grew up on boats. We're in the Oregon area. I mean, I can see why someone does. We rode the ferries for days, on our way to Prince of Wales Island from Oregon.
No issues.
Like, I like them. I like boats.
Me too. But
I don't like storms on the ocean while I'm on a boat.
Weird. I wonder why.
Or anything else. I don't like storms out on water, It's about the ocean, man.
I don't like water. I can't see the bottom of.
When we were in Alaska, just storms hit a lake, and we were paddling in those little alpaca rafts, and I was like,
time to get out of here.
It was like tidal waves, and the wind and the rain. It was nasty.
No thanks.
It's amazing how big those waves can get in just a little lake. But he wasn't the only one. The decks of the boat positively writhed with the vomiting, sallow-faced mountain men. A Navy chaplain that Reverend Walter Colton found it hilarious that these wild savages, under whose heavy tramp the ground seemed to tremble, should be so helpless at sea. Wrote Colton, they are laying about the deck in a spirit of resignation that would satisfy the non-resistant principles of a Quaker. 2 or 3 resolute old women might tumble the whole lot of them into the sea. I guess they were pretty down and out. So they arrive in San Diego on July 29, and they're met with no resistance whatsoever. A brace of Marines marched ashore and raised the American flag over the town. For a week, Fremont was entertained by the leading citizens of San Diego, while Carson went on to scour the surrounding country. As they waited for Commodore Stockton to sail south, the days were bright and hot, the sky pure and entirely cloudless, and the nights cool and beautifully scenery. Commodore Stockton got out of Monterey Bay, stopped off. By the time he arrived in the waters of Los Angeles, General Castro had already composed a formal letter to Governor Pio Pico stating that he did not think it was possible to defend the Pueblo. General Castro wrote, we got our butts kicked. We can't win this thing. They didn't even fight, dude.
Hey, I don't blame him.
It says, he basically said, it's painful to necessity to inform your excellency that it was impossible for me to do anything.
Sorry, bro.
Typical Mexican army. I hate to say it, but on August 13, Fremont and Stockton consolidated their forces and marched into Los Angeles without contest. Our entry, boasted Fremont, had more the effect of a parade of home guards than of an enemy taking possession of a conquered town. So yeah, that was it, dude. They just took California. Polk, in which he trumpeted that he had chased the Mexican army more than 300 miles along the coast, pursued them 30 miles in the interior of their own country, routed and dispersed them and secured the territory to the United States, ended the war, restored peace and harmony among the people, and put a civil government into successful operation. Stockton planned to leave California as soon as possible. They were anxious to get back, he and Frémont, to brag about how they had conquered California.
Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you like to go and be like, yeah, I took California. No one thought I did.
Yeah, Frémont suggested that they write dispatches and send them overland, placing them in the able hands of none other than Kit Carson.
What about Gillespie? That's his job.
Gillespie. He was good at boats, Brent.
Fine. Double back. Go at the back Hawaii way or whatever.
Carson would ensure the safety and speedy delivery of these important papers, Frémont reasoned, and the plum assignment would be a reward for his brave and valuable service on many occasions. And it would allow him to stop and see his wife Josepha. It would be a service of high trust and honor and of great danger also, Frémont said, but Carson would enjoy going off at the head of his own party with carte blanche for expenses and the prospect of novel pleasure and honor at the end. So Carson took on the assignment and pledged to make the journey in 60 days.
Whoa.
From California to
Washington.
Mm-hmm. As usual, the feat would be accomplished on the backs of mules. Cussed though they assuredly were, mules, not horses, were winning the West. The sterile cross between a horse and a mare and a jackass, mules were stronger, sturdier, sure-footed, and less liable to spook. They lived longer.
It's so harder. Weird that they're sterile.
Hybrid vigor. They could carry greater loads longer on less feed and on feed of a poor quality. Although they were usually slower and seemed to be designed by committee, they could better withstand temperature extremes and other vagaries of weather. They got donkey ears. People like Carson, who had been among them all his life, were superstitious about their mules. Some people insisted mules could detect water 5 miles away. They could tell if a hailstorm was approaching. They could smell blood. They were even clairvoyant. The literature of the mountain men is rife with stories of mules who saved their owners by sensing the coming attack of hostile Indians and by clearly communicating their apprehension through one anxious tick or another. Later accounts of celebrating Kit Carson's great rides almost invariably placed him on a fleet and noble steed, but that was a bit of equestrian chauvinism. Every time Carson aimed for the other side of the continent, he was on a mule. On the morning of September 5th, Stockton and Frémont stuffed his saddlebags with all manner of correspondence. Then Carson, the scout turned transcontinental courier, mounted his mule and headed east toward the sunrise with 15 men, including 6 Delaware Indians.
That's what I was wondering. Was he to do that all by himself, single solo guy, or was he going with the party?
Including him, it's 19 men. 19 men.
There you go.
6, no, more than that. It's 15 men and 6 Delawares. So 21, 22 plus himself.
Jeez. And they're going to go, holy cow,
60 days.
60 days.
Yep. Right around September 5th, which means November. They got to get there by like the first week of November.
Yeah, they're hosed otherwise. Jeez, bro. That's intense. I couldn't do it.
Well, especially because some of these regions do get lots of snow even at that time. Like battling through the snow is no joke. You know, if you get lucky and there's no snow. But by late October in some areas, depending on which passes they're going to cover.
And you know the snow's not going to stop him. If it just snows, he's just got to figure a way to get through the snow.
But it is before the dead heavy winter hits, typically. That's why you got to make it. You got to go. Okay. So the next section, we're finally getting to the Army of the West and Armijo and the pass, Apache Canyon. It's just a cool name.
It is a cool name.
And things get bloody, boy. They get bloody. Men with ears down to their ankles. It's the chapter. Daggers in every look. So there you go.
Ears down to your ankles.
Yep. So what do you think about that? California was a hard one. To me, if it was that easy to just take it, then it was kind of meant to be taken, right? Like, it was just like, look, it just needed a matter of someone to say it's ours now and then fortify it. Right?
Yep. If it wasn't the Spanish or the English,
it was like, it was
someone was going to come and do it.
I think what it was is, you had the heart of the people in certain areas, and basically California was an outpost of Mexico. And it's a case of taking land and claiming land for which you don't have really a means of keeping it. And somebody else got there before you could fortify it and just made it theirs. Mm-hmm. There was no fighting for it. And boom, it's done. So Oregon, Washington, Brent, how do those make it into the American West?
Well, Brian, again, not the best Oregonian education received. I'm not 100% sure what goes down here.
Well, you're going to learn just like everybody else who doesn't know. So, all right, that's it for today. Hope you guys are enjoying the books here and the podcast. Appreciate you for going out of your way to support us. Really do. And we look forward to diving into this next part of the story on the next episode. Till then, shoot straight. All right, folks, I hope you're enjoying the Dueling Pistols podcast. If you like it, do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help us get this thing to grow a little bit bigger. Tell your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your buddy, your uncle.
Go to
your grandpa.
Hit select all, send.
Just sell it. Just share it with a friend of yours, somebody, and help us spread the word about the show. Thanks for supporting us. We'll catch you on the next episode.